Everyone could see the glowing countdown timer above my twin sister Clara's head. Everyone knew she was destined to die the year she turned 18. Because of this, Clara was the absolute center of our universe. The TV remote was always hers. The first bite of any delicious meal was always hers. And our parents' undivided, suffocating love was entirely hers. I knew it wasn't her fault, but I couldn't help the bitter envy that grew inside me. Finally, on the eve of her 18th birthday, Clara made a wish. She wanted to die in a place closest to the sky. So the family planned a trip to Aspen. Everyone went, except me. Before they left, my parents looked at me as I lay in bed, coughing violently. My mother frowned, her voice cold. "Chloe, watch the house. And do not open the door for anyone." I rasped out, "Mom, please, can you take me to the hospital? My chest hurt so bad." My mother pursed her lips and sighed. "Chloe, where would we get the money for your hospital bills? Do you have any idea how expensive this trip to Aspen is? But my lungs, they burn." No one answered me. The only response was the heavy thud of the front door locking from the outside. The agonizing pain suddenly vanished. When I opened my eyes again, the breathtaking, sacred snow-capped mountains of Aspen stretched out before me. My parents were sitting in the first-class cabin of a plane. Premium meals were laid out on the trays in front of them, but every single plate was pushed toward Clara. My mother coaxed her gently, her voice dripping with warmth. "Clara, sweetheart, which one do you want to try first?" My father pushed a glass of fresh juice forward. "Here, Clara. Have a sip to wet your throat first." Clara looked at the gourmet food and offered a weak, fragile smile. She whispered, "Mom, Dad, did we leave any food for Chloe before we left?" The smiles on my parents' faces instantly froze. Clara continued softly, "Chloe was so sick. I'm worried she won't be able to cook for herself. And she said last week that she was tired of canned soup." A pang of sadness hit my chest, but no tears fell. "She'll eat when she gets hungry enough," my mother answered dismissively. She scooped up a spoonful of creamy pasta and brought it to Clara's lips. "Come on, Clara, just eat. It breaks my heart to see you starving yourself." My father chimed in. "You are just too sweet, Clara. Even at a time like this, you're still worrying about her. But look at her. Does she ever think about you? She knew we didn't have much money, yet she still threw a fit because she couldn't come with us. She didn't even stop to think about how much time you have left." My father sighed, cutting himself off. My mother started dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, and Clara had no choice but to stay quiet. But I noticed Clara's clenched fingers. They betrayed her anxiety. Clara grew up surrounded by the family's ultimate devotion. Because of that, she was the only one who truly understood how deeply I was neglected. When we were kids, a neighbor brought over 2 beautiful dresses, saying there was one for each twin. But my mother took both and gave them to Clara. Our Clara has so little time left. If she doesn't experience these things now, she'll never get the chance. That night, Clara asked me, "Chloe, do you want the dress?" I nodded. Without a word, Clara spilled permanent blue ink all over one of the dresses. With no other choice, my mother had to let me have the ruined one. But when I looked into Clara's eyes, I knew. She had done it on purpose. Even though I got the dress, Clara wasn't happy. She kept apologizing to me. "I'm so sorry, Chloe. I could only give you the dirty one. I always make you suffer." We were so young, yet we both understood a cruel truth. Only the broken, ruined things would ever be passed down to me. The suppressed resentment kept building inside me until it finally exploded when we were 10. On our 10th birthday, Clara and I went down to play in the backyard of our apartment complex. After just a few minutes, Clara got tired and wanted to go back inside. But I hadn't had enough. I threw a tantrum, demanding to stay out longer. My mother tried to reason with me, but I refused to listen. I couldn't understand why absolutely everything had to revolve around Clara. In a fit of rage, I shoved Clara hard, sending her crashing to the ground. I screamed through my tears, "I don't want to go home. I want to play. If you want to go back, go by yourself. Why do I always have to listen to you? Why?" I can't remember what was going through my head back then. Maybe it was a sense of unfairness, or maybe it was just pure jealousy. I screamed and rolled on the grass, crying at the top of my lungs. Like any obnoxious, desperate child, I thought throwing a massive tantrum would get me what I wanted. But my mother didn't back down. She stared at me, her eyes turning bloodshot. She raised her hand high and slapped me across the face. "Chloe Miller, do you have any idea that your sister only has 18 years on this earth? You have a whole lifetime to play. Why do you have to fight her for this single moment? How much time do you think she has left?" My father stood by, his eyes red and watery. He didn't stop her. I wailed from the pain of the slap. Clara immediately threw herself over me, shielding me from my mother. She cried, "Mom, I want to play too. We don't have to go home. Please don't hit Chloe." That night, after my mother applied ointment to my bruised cheek, Clara crept into my room. I turned my head away, refusing to look at her. But then a warm tear fell onto my shoulder. I turned back and saw her tear-filled eyes. She handed me a fancy mechanical pencil, one I had wanted for months. She whispered, "Chloe, I'm so sorry." She didn't know what else to say, and I didn't know how to answer. An apology like that shouldn't have come from her. It shouldn't have come from me either. It should have come from our goddamn fate. But fate was silent. So Clara had to carry the guilt. Back in the first-class cabin, my mother wiped her tears and put another piece of grilled chicken onto Clara's plate. "Clara, stop thinking about it. Here, eat. You're such a good girl." "But Chloe, she's just too rebellious." Rebellious? Was I? I didn't know. When I was little, I used to cry because of the favoritism. As I grew older, I learned to cry in secret. I wanted to scream back, to tell them that I was good, that I could stay home alone, cook for myself, and comfort myself when I was scared. But even though I spoke, no one heard me. Then my final memory flashed through my mind. It was the copper taste of blood bubbling up from my lungs, coughing it up onto the floor, and then collapsing into complete darkness. Oh, I see. I was already dead. I watched Clara quietly. The suffocating countdown timer that used to hover over her head was completely gone. When we were kids, that timer was the very first thing I learned to hate. I remember asking Clara what those numbers meant. Clara had bit her lip and told me, "It's a countdown for me to become a princess. When the time runs out, I'll turn into a princess." I had looked at her, confused. Then why are Mom and Dad always so sad? Clara stroked my hair, her voice incredibly soft. "Because once I become a princess, I'll turn into sea foam, just like the Little Mermaid. I won't be able to see you anymore." But back then, I refused to accept that. I knew what princesses were. Being a princess meant being happy. It meant having a prince who loved you, countless jewels, and all the expensive raspberry gelato you could eat. Every summer, my mother would buy gourmet raspberry gelato, but it was always reserved solely for Clara. My mother would tell me, "This is too sweet for you, Chloe. Don't eat it." But I love sweet things. I would argue. But my mother always pretended not to hear. I couldn't understand it. If Clara was going to become a princess and live in luxury, why did I have to give up my few miserable pieces of happiness to her now? So I ran to my mother and declared, "I have a countdown over my head too. When my time runs out, I'm going to turn into a princess. I want the raspberry gelato too." The spoon in my mother's hand froze. She stared at me, her entire body trembling with rage. She rasped, "What did you just say?" I screamed, "I have a countdown too. I'm going to turn into a princess. When that happens, I'll leave you guys and I'll eat tons of raspberry gelato." Slap. My mother slapped me hard across the face. She broke down sobbing. "Are you trying to drive me to my grave? Do you really think that countdown is a good thing?" Clara heard the commotion and rushed over to pull my mother away. But my mother seemed to have lost her mind. She started slapping her own face, screaming, "I'm useless. I'm a terrible mother." I watched in absolute terror, unable to comprehend why she was reacting this way. Wasn't becoming a princess a good thing? That night, I overheard my father comforting my mother in their room. "Chloe is still young. She doesn't understand." My mother sobbed hoarsely. "But what am I supposed to do? There are only 10 years left. In 10 years, our Clara will be gone forever." It was only then that I finally understood. The end of the countdown didn't mean becoming a princess. It meant leaving this family forever. Clara was actually going to die. Back in first class, Clara finished her meal and drifted off to sleep. My mother bit her lip and turned to my father. "David, how do you think Chloe is doing at home? Does her chest still hurt?" My father sighed. "There's no signal on the plane. I'll call her as soon as we land." My mother said softly, "Let's call her tomorrow. Today is Clara's last day." My mother turned her head to look out the window, her voice cracking with emotion. "Chloe will understand. She's about to lose her sister forever." The plane landed. My mother took Clara to the duty-free shops to distract her. My father hesitated for a long time before finally pulling out his phone to call me. The call didn't go through. His brow furrowed slightly, and he tried again. Actually, it was hard to tell if he was genuinely frowning. He frowned so much over the years that a deep crease had permanently etched itself between his brows. He always looked unhappy. The second call went unanswered too. He opened Snapchat and typed, "Chloe, are you awake? Did you eat anything?" I floated right in front of him, waving my ghostly hands. "Dad, I didn't eat. But I'm not hungry anymore. Please just come home and check on me. Chloe." He sent another message. But he couldn't see me and he couldn't hear me. Finally, he let out a long sigh and locked his phone. He muttered to himself, "If only I could make more money. If only we could have brought Chloe along too. Well, Chloe still has a long life ahead of her. I'll bring her next time." With that, my father stood up. I watched his retreating back and whispered, "Dad, I don't have a next time anymore. I only have the past." My mother and Clara walked out of the duty-free shop. My father immediately took the shopping bags from Clara's hands. My mother asked. Did Chloe pick up? My father pursed his lips. It didn't go through. My mother sighed. That girl, she's throwing a tantrum again. My father led Clara forward, while my mother pulled out her phone and sent me a text. Did you eat? Still no response. She opened her Venmo. She had a little over $7,000 left in her balance. She muttered, $3,000 for the hotel, $2,000 for food, $2,000 for Clara's emergency medical reserve. Gritting her teeth, she Venmo'd me $500 with a note. Chloe, stop being mad at me. Take this money and go buy some medicine. But the money remained unclaimed, and the message went unread. My mother huffed in annoyance. She's really getting out of hand. She shoved her phone back into her purse and walked away with giant strides. I stared at her back and whispered, Mom, I can't accept it anymore. Clara had an amazing time. Through their eyes, I also got to see sights I had never experienced in my life. We lived in the warm South, and I had never seen real snow. But today, I saw the majestic, snow-capped peaks of the mountains. When they returned to the resort after a day of sightseeing, my mother's phone suddenly rang. It was the HOA representative from our apartment complex. Hello, Mrs. Miller. We've received several complaints from your neighbors about a terrible odor coming from your unit. My mother's eyebrows knitted together tightly. An odor? My father muttered. Could Chloe be doing something stupid just to spite us? My mother's face instantly darkened. She opened our chat history. The $500 she had sent on Venmo had just been automatically returned to her account, because it went unclaimed for too long. Tears instantly spilled from my mother's eyes. She's doing this on purpose. She chose this exact moment to pull this stunt. She wants to ruin her sister's very last day. She wants to make sure Clara doesn't have a single moment of peace. My mother sobbed louder and louder, and my father rushed to comfort her. The HOA representative on the phone sounded incredibly awkward. Is there anyone home? We've been knocking on your door for hours, but no one is answering. Also, several neighbors mentioned that your younger daughter hasn't been seen leaving the apartment for days. My mother lost her temper and screamed into the phone. If she wants to stay inside, let her stay inside. Even if she dies in there, it has nothing to do with me. I watched her quietly. She couldn't see me. I let out a soft sigh. Mom, I actually am dead. The shouting woke Clara up. She pushed open her bedroom door, her voice groggy. Mom, what's wrong? Why are you so angry? My parents froze. My mother flew across the room and locked Clara in a desperate, crushing hug. Clara, my Clara, you're still here. Thank God, you're still here. She held Clara so tightly, as if she wanted to fuse Clara into her own flesh. Even my father, who always tried to play the tough guy, began to weep silently. The HOA representative, still on the line, asked, should we go ahead and open the door then? My mother snapped. Open it. I want to see what kind of sick game Chloe is playing. The representative started a FaceTime video call to show them the entry. They unlocked the door and pushed it open. The moment the camera panned inside, the hysterical relief on my mother's face vanished. Her mouth hung open but no sound came out. She could only make raw, choked noises from the back of her throat. Ow, how? The phone camera trembled in the HOA representative's hands as he stepped over the threshold. On the screen in Aspen, the bright, luxurious lighting of the mountain resort seemed to bleed away, replaced by the dark, suffocating shadows of our small apartment 800 miles south. Mrs. Miller? The representative's voice quavered through the speaker. The smell. It's coming from the hallway. My mother didn't answer. Her phone was held inches from her face, her eyes wide, unblinking, glassy. The camera panned down the narrow corridor, past the kitchen where the sink was dry, past the living room where my school backpack still hung limply on the chair, and stopped right in front of the locked master bedroom door. Or rather, my bedroom door. The one my father had secured with a heavy brass padlock 2 years ago when I started throwing tantrums about wanting my own space. The lock is still engaged, the representative murmured. He motioned to the locksmith standing beside him. Clack. The bolt snapped back. The heavy wooden door creaked open. The representative stepped inside, and the camera tilted down toward the hardwood floor right behind the door. There I lay. My body was curled into a tight, fragile ball against the bottom of the door frame. My fingernails were torn. Dried blood caked beneath them where I had desperately clawed at the painted wood in the dark. A dark, rusted stain of dried blood spread outward from my mouth, soaking into the thin, faded carpet. Beside my hand lay an empty glass of water, shattered into 3 pieces. Oh God! The representative gasped, dropping the phone slightly. Jesus Christ! There's a girl here. She's in Aspen. My mother didn't scream. Instead, a strange, wet clicking sound came from her throat. Her knee simply gave out. She dropped to the plush carpet of the hotel suite like a sack of wet flour, her hand still holding the phone face up. My father lunged forward, snatching the phone from the floor. His face was gray. his lips trembling so violently he could barely form words. "Chloe," he whispered to the screen. "Chloe? Wake up. Stop playing around. Chloe." The camera zoomed in closer. My face was pale, translucent, my eyes closed, my skin cold and smooth as wax. I looked smaller than I ever had in life, as if the illness had hollowed me out from the inside until there was nothing left to hold. "Chloe," my father roared into the phone, his voice shattering into a high, hysterical screech. "Chloe. Vicky, call an ambulance. Call an ambulance right now." "It's too late, sir." The representative's voice came back, flat, terrified, and distant. She's cold. She's been gone for days." Clara stood at the bedroom doorway of the suite, her small hands clutching her white nightgown. She looked at our father on his knees, then looked at the screen. She didn't cry right away. She walked slowly, step by step, across the warm carpet, picked up the dropped phone, and stared at my lifeless face on the screen. The countdown timer that had haunted her for 18 years was gone from her head. But as she looked at me, a single tear rolled down her cheek, leaving a pale track through the dust on her face. "Chloe," Clara whispered softly. "You became the princess first." They abandoned Aspen within 30 minutes. There was no packing. My mother left her designer winter coat, her diamond earrings, and the expensive leather boots my father had bought her for the trip, lying on the hotel bed. They took the first available flight back, sitting in the very same first-class cabin where 36 hours ago, my mother had fed Clara creamy pasta and grilled chicken. Now no food was served. My mother sat in her seat, staring straight ahead at the plastic tray table. Her hands were clamped over her ears, her knuckles white, her teeth chattering as if she were freezing to death in the middle of a heated airplane. "She was just spiting me," my mother muttered, her voice a dry, raspy wind. "She did it to spite me. She knew we were going to Aspen. She knew." "Shut up, Sarah," my father rasped. It was the first time in 18 years he had ever used that tone with her. He sat with his face buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking in rhythmic, silent jerks. Clara sat between them. She didn't look at either of them. She held the small, mechanical pencil she had given me on our 10th birthday, the one she had retrieved from her own bag before leaving the hotel. I floated above them in the cabin aisle, watching them. "Mom," I whispered, drifting down until my ghostly face was inches from hers. "I didn't do it to spite you. My chest just hurt so bad. The blood wouldn't stop coming out." She couldn't hear me. She just kept rocking back and forth, muttering under her breath. When they finally arrived at our apartment complex at midnight, the hallway was lit by flashing red and blue lights. Police tape crossed our front door. 2 officers stood outside, taking notes, while neighbors hovered at the end of the corridor, whispering in hushed, horrified tones. "That's them," a neighbor pointed, her voice dripping with disgust. "That's the parents. They locked the poor girl inside while they went on vacation." I heard the police say she died of severe lung failure and internal bleeding. Another whispered, "She was trapped in there for 3 days." My father pushed through the crowd, his face pale as death. "I'm her father. Let me in." An officer stepped forward, blocking his path with a stern, icy expression. "David Miller? Sarah Miller? Where is my daughter?" My mother screamed, suddenly breaking her silence, clawing at the officer's uniform. "Where is my Chloe? Give her back to me. Your daughter's body has been transported to the city morgue for an autopsy." The officer replied, his voice entirely devoid of warmth. "And right now, Mr. and Mrs. Miller, you are coming with us to the precinct for questioning regarding child endangerment and negligent homicide." Inside the cold, stark interrogation room, the fluorescent lights hummed loudly. A female detective sat across from my parents, flipping through a thick manila folder. On the table lay several items recovered from my room: a rusted pair of scissors, an empty plastic pill bottle dated 3 years ago, and a small, worn paper notebook. According to the medical examiner, the detective began, her voice dropping into a dangerous, quiet rhythm. Chloe suffered from chronic pulmonary tuberculosis complicated by severe bronchial hemorrhage. Her lungs were over 80% scarred. My mother sat stiffly, her eyes wild. She just had a cold. She always complained about having a cold. A cold. The detective slammed a piece of paper onto the table. "This is a medical record from the city clinic 3 years ago. The doctor explicitly warned you that Chloe needed immediate hospitalization and advanced respiratory therapy. Why wasn't she treated?" My father swallowed hard, his voice cracking. We didn't have the money. Clara, our other daughter, she was sick. She needed special care." "Special care?" The detective sneered, pulling out another document. "According to your bank records, over the last 3 years, you spent $32,000 on Clara's private tutors, luxury clothes, resort trips, and gourmet imported food. Meanwhile, Chloe didn't have a single prescription filled after her 15th birthday. My father went deathly silent. And then, the detective continued, leaning across the table, her eyes burning into my mother's. On the morning of October 12th, you locked the apartment door from the outside, leaving a terminally ill 17-year-old girl with no food, no medicine, and a dry water pitcher, so you could take your other daughter on a luxury ski trip to Aspen. I sent her $500, my mother shrieked, tears finally bursting from her eyes as she slammed her fist on the table. I Venmo'd her $500. She could have bought food. She could have called an ambulance. Her phone was disconnected 2 weeks ago because you stopped paying her bill. Mrs. Miller, the detective replied coldly. She couldn't use Venmo. She couldn't call 911. She couldn't open the door. My mother froze. Her hand stayed midair, her mouth hanging open. What did you say? She whispered. You disconnected her service on the 1st of the month, the detective said, pulling out a telecommunications statement. You transferred her line allowance to Clara's international roaming plan. My mother stared at the piece of paper. The $500 she had sent on Venmo, the text messages she had typed, the angry complaints she had yelled into the wind. None of it had ever reached me. I had sat in that dark room, clutching my aching chest, watching the screen of my dead phone remain black, waiting for a ring that was never going to come. My mother let out a sound that didn't sound human. It was a sharp, strangled howl that ripped through her throat as she collapsed forward, slamming her head against the wooden table over and over again. I killed her, she wailed, her hands tearing at her own hair, ripping out graying strands. I killed my baby. I killed my Chloe. I stood in the corner of the room, looking at her broken form. Mom, I whispered, my ghostly voice floating softly through the cold air. You didn't kill me. You just forgot about me. Because the case attracted massive public outrage, my parents were released on heavy bail pending their formal trial. When they returned to the apartment, the police tape was gone but the front door was unlocked. The apartment was deathly quiet. Clara sat on the floor of my room, surrounded by my few belongings. She held a dusty cardboard box she had pulled from beneath my bed, the box where I kept everything I had ever owned. My father stumbled into the room, looking like a hollow shell of a man, his eyes bloodshot and vacant. My mother followed behind him, her movements slow, mechanical, like a corpse walking. Clara. My father rasped. What are you doing? Clara didn't look up. She lifted an item from the box. It was the blue dress, the one from our childhood that Clara had covered in permanent ink so my mother would let me have it. I had kept it for 8 years. Even though it was far too small for me, even though the blue ink stain was still dark and ugly against the yellow fabric, I had kept it neatly folded at the very bottom of the box. Attached to the dress was a small, handwritten tag in my childish handwriting. Clara's dress. She broke it so I wouldn't be sad. My mother dropped to her knees beside Clara, her trembling hands reaching out to touch the faded fabric. She kept it. My mother sobbed, her tears soaking into the blue ink stain. She kept this old thing. Clara pulled out another item. It was a cheap lined spiral notebook, my diary. From when I was 12. My father reached over, his hands shaking as he opened the yellowed pages. July 14th. Today Mom bought raspberry gelato for Clara again. It smelled so good. Clara tried to give me a spoonful when Mom turned around, but I said no. If Mom saw, she would be angry at Clara. I told Clara I hate gelato anyway. I think I lied pretty well. August 20th. My chest hurt today when I was sweeping the floor. I wanted to tell Dad, but he was busy looking at Clara's report card. Clara got an A in music. Dad looked so happy. I haven't seen him smile like that in a long time. I decided not to tell him. I don't want to ruin his smile. December 4th. I saw a countdown timer over Clara's head today. It says 6 years left. I cried in the bathroom for an hour. Why does Clara have to leave? She's the only one who shares her mechanical pencils with me. God, if you are listening, please take my time instead. Clara is nice. I'm just rebellious. My father stopped reading. The notebook fell from his fingers, fluttering closed on the floor. He looked up at the ceiling, his chest heaving, his mouth open in an agonizing, silent scream. He had spent 8 years believing I was a selfish, envious, rebellious child who fought my sister for every scrap of attention. He had spent 8 years telling himself that I was the evil twin, the one who didn't care if my sister lived or died. And all the while, the girl he had locked in the dark had been praying to trade her life for Clara's. Chloe. My father wept, dragging his body across the floor until his forehead touched my dusty carpet. Chloe. I'm sorry. Dad is sorry. Please come back, please. Clara sat amidst the paper, her face completely calm, her eyes dark and empty. She looked up at the corner of the room, right where my ghost was standing. Chloe, Clara whispered softly, her voice clear and steady. You don't have to protect me anymore. The funeral was small. No flowers, no music, no crowds of weeping friends. Because of the criminal charges, my parents had lost their jobs. Their savings were completely drained by legal fees, and the neighbors turned their faces away whenever they walked down the street. My body lay in a small, plain wooden casket at the front of the chapel. My mother sat in the front row, wearing an old, faded black coat. She looked 80 years old. Her hands were permanently raw and red from clutching my blue dress, which she refused to let go of for a single second. My father sat beside her, his head bowed, his hands resting on his knees, staring at the floor with unseeing eyes. Clara walked up to the casket alone. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out 2 items. A small, freshly bought cup of raspberry gelato, and a brand new mechanical pencil. She set them gently on top of the plain wooden lid. Chloe, Clara whispered, pressing her hand against the polished wood. The timer is gone from my head now. I thought it meant I was saved. But yesterday, when I looked in the mirror, I saw the timer again. Clara smiled, a soft, sad, beautiful smile. It wasn't over my head this time. It was over Mom and Dad's heads. Their timer says 0. They're already dead inside, Chloe. They're just breathing. I floated down from the ceiling, stepping beside Clara. I reached out my ghostly hand and gently stroked her hair, just like she used to do for me when we were little. Don't be sad, Clara, I whispered into her ear. You survived. That's all I ever wanted. A soft, warm light began to glow behind the altar of the chapel. It didn't smell like copper blood, cold medicine, or rot. It smelled like fresh snow, sweet raspberry gelato, and the warm, open summer skies I had never been allowed to see. I turned around, took one last look at my mother weeping over her ruined blue dress, and took my first step into the light. I didn't turn into sea foam. I didn't turn into a princess. I just became Chloe, free, weightless, and finally completely at peace.